February 27, 1933, Germany's Reichstag building was set on fire. Hitler used this event as a pretext to pass the Enabling Act, which essentially nullified the German constitution and gave Hitler unfettered dictatorial power. Though the fire was blamed on a mentally ill communist who was subsequently put to death, in 1946, German diplomat, intelligence officer, and former member of the Gestapo Hans Gesivius stated that the fire was actually started by the Nazis themselves. Hitler wasted no time putting the Enabling Act into motion, rounding up political dissidents, shutting down journalists, consolidating his power domestically. In August of 1938, German authorities began expelling Jews of Polish descent. The majority of the deportees were rejected at the Polish border and were sent back across the river into Germany. This continued for days, with the refugees marching in the pouring rain without food or shelter between the two borders. The conditions were so bad that some tried to escape back into Germany and were shot. On November 7, 1938, Herschel Greenspan, a Jew of Polish descent whose family was among those deported, walked into a German embassy and shot an officer. On November 9th, Joseph Goebbels, Hitler's propaganda minister, used this event to incite the Night of Broken Glass, or Kristallnacht, during which thousands of Jewish businesses and synagogues were ransacked, and thousands of Jews were rounded up to later be sent to concentration camps. On November the 11th, 1938, the Minister of the Interior, Wilhelm Frick, passed the regulations against Jews' possessions of weapons, stripping the Jews of the right to possess firearms or other weapons. The application of this new law was greatly facilitated by the 1928 Law on Firearms and Ammunition, which had mandated comprehensive gun registration and had already greatly restricted citizens' right to access weapons. Once the Jews were disarmed, there were no further barriers to prevent the genocide that was to follow. People have the tendency to look at history in isolation, not seeing how it connects to events that are unfolding right now. The possibility of a government like Hitler's rising to power in America seems far-fetched in such a context, but such short-sightedness is extremely dangerous. In 2001, America had its Reichstag event, which brought us the Patriot Act, which is essentially the Enabling Act, painted in red, white, and blue. The NDAA of 2012 and 2013, which was signed by Obama, reinforced the Patriot Act, making it much less likely to be revoked anytime in the near future. Hitler rose to power during a time of extreme economic instability. Such periods always facilitate the rise of violent demagogues. The United States is in the early stages of a much more serious economic crisis, one that will make the Great Depression pale in comparison. As this situation progresses, you can rest assured that the Patriot Act and the NDAA are going to start being used more and more. They didn't go to all the trouble of writing those laws for nothing, and they certainly didn't write it to protect the American people from Arab terrorists. The US government uses terrorists to justify taking away your freedom. Hitler used communists. There's one last obstacle blocking anyone seeking to impose an overt military dictatorship in the United States, and that's the fact that the American people are an armed people, and a large percentage of them intend to stay that way, even if it means having to fight for it. Often people make the argument that weapons owned by the American public, such as semi-automatic rifles, pistols, and shotguns, would be useless against the technology possessed by the US military. This is true. However, in such a conflict, the targets wouldn't be military at all. The targets would be the political leaders and the financial oligarchs which created the situation. It's one thing for these guys to start wars with countries who can't defend themselves in the Middle East. It's another thing entirely when you have a guerrilla insurgency in your own neighborhood. If you're coming from the left, you may not understand the intense reactions you're seeing coming from gun owners as you start talking about disarming them. I know a lot of you think they're crazy, and I'm sure some of you think that they're bluffing. One thing I can assure you is that they're not bluffing. If the government attempts to confiscate guns or enforce universal gun registration, there will be bloodshed. And what you need to understand is that there's a large contingency of police and military which are not going to go along with this. It's worth noting that the vast majority of police and military identify themselves as conservatives, and they strongly support the Second Amendment. Already there are sheriffs, soldiers, and highly motivated, well-armed civilians publicly drawing their line in the sand. This is not the kind of situation you want to take lightly. If America goes down this road, people are going to die. And this is especially ridiculous when you look at the facts surrounding these weapons in context. Semi-automatic rifles are involved in less murders each year than hammers, crowbars, and other blunt objects. And to act like the US government actually cares about stopping civilian deaths is ridiculous. Look at what they're doing in the Middle East. They're killing men, women, and children every day. And then they'll tell you that the US government wants to keep guns out of the hands of criminals. Then why was it that the ATF recently got caught selling weapons directly to the Mexican mafia? Google Operation Fast and Furious. I dare you. Listen, they're gonna feed you these kinds of excuses because that's what you want to hear. But the real reason they're gonna go for the guns is because they want absolute power. And if the public is disarmed, that's what they'll have. Think about the police brutality that you saw during the Occupy protest. Now imagine that these protests are a little bit more intense because people are actually starting to go hungry. And once again, they start doing mass arrests like we've seen before, but this time, people disappear and they don't come back. Now this happens over and over and over again throughout history. You would be insane to think that this couldn't happen in the United States. especially in the current context, especially when you see your government preparing for this kind of situation, especially when they've already passed laws making it legal for the military to disappear civilians like this. And you've been conditioned to believe that this is a question of left versus right, Republican versus Democrat, liberal versus conservative. But when political dissidents start disappearing, you're going to want those conservatives by your side, and you're going to want them to be armed. The difference between a revolution and a genocide is the ability to defend yourself. If you don't see this danger, then you're not paying attention. And even if you aren't, there's a lot of people who are, and they're not going to just lay down and let this happen. Please, America, don't go down this path. We're only going to get one chance to influence how the situation unfolds. So if you agree with the message in this video, please share it with your friends. Share it on Facebook, share it on Twitter. Get it out to as many people as you can through as many avenues as possible. And if you want more content like this, be sure to subscribe and follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and visit our website at stormcloudsgathering.com.